Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where in the world you are joining me from. I'm Illuminati. This is the Crypto and Cognac Podcast Show, as always, live every Thursday, 7 p.m. sharp Atlantic Standard Time. Right here, where? YouTube, right? And if I'm here, what are there? Any day, anywhere, me there, any day, right? Guys, welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you with me. Pour yourself a drink. Cheers. Because this is episode 4, season 7 of the Crypto and Cognac Podcast. Of course, if you guys follow us on Instagram at Crypto Caribbean, if you follow us on YouTube, Crypto Caribbean TV, you know that today we are talking about the 4-year Bitcoin/crypto cycle, right? Especially with everything that has been happening, everything happening right at this very moment, with a significant correction, right? People are wondering, is it over? Which we talked about last week. And if it's not over, has this 4-year cycle gone bye-bye, right? Shout out to everybody watching. Shout out to Eddie. Shout out to Stevie. Shout out to everybody tuned in wherever you are. As always, housekeeping before we get into the conversation. I drink Hennessy. I am not a financial advisor, which makes this not a financial advisory podcast, right? The same way we have our Hennessy is the same way we have our crypto conversation, and we go by the ICE rule, right? That means that all this is purely for information, conversation, a little bit of education. I share a little bit with you, you share a little bit with me, and hopefully on the other side of this show, right, we have a little bit more answers, right? So, as always, do your own research. Remember to drink, drive, and degen responsibly, always, right? No matter what the shipper tells you, do your own research. So, as we jump straight into it, if you have been in crypto for a little while, you would know the saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? And that is particularly the case for the Bitcoin cycle, right? If you have been around since 2012, you know that every 4 years we experience a phenomena called the Bitcoin cycle, and it's one of the most consistent phenomena in the whole financial space, right? And it's because Bitcoin's cycle is not just a matter of folklore, right? It is built directly into the code of the Bitcoin network, right? What do we know? Since its introduction, since its inception, Bitcoin has never failed. It continues to do what it promised to do every single 10 minutes, or on average every 10 minutes, a new block is mined. What does that mean? Well, not what does that mean. Every 10 minutes, a new block is mined, right? And for each of those blocks, block rewards are issued by the network, right? And the block rewards are issued for securing the network, of course. So every 10 minutes, a block is mined. And what we know is that every 210,000 blocks, roughly every 4 years, the reward for mining that block is halved, right? So like I said, in 2012, the Bitcoin block reward would have been 25 BTC. By 2016, that would have halved to 12.5 BTC. By 2020, that would have halved again to 6.25 BTC. And then in 2024, during the last halving, that would have further been halved by 3.125 BTC. Well, I guess by 3.125 BTC as well. Now, what does the halving result in, right? It basically means that the supply of new BTC coming into the market is reduced, right? Usually resulting in a scarcity position, usually resulting in a supply shock, because if the market is generally used to every 10 minutes, 25 BTC coming into the market, and that turns with the same amount of demand from 25 BTC coming into the market to 12.5 BTC coming into the market with the same demand, that usually means more demand for lower supply, right? Or similar demand for lower supply. And that oftentimes results in a supply shock. Now, while the whole BTC block timing, block rewards is built into the network itself, that is not the only thing that has contributed to this 4-year cycle. Obviously, that is the mechanics of things, but there is a human element to that, because when humans come to expect something, right, human behavior takes over. And what we've seen is that each halving triggers a new wave of speculation in the market, right? So investors anticipate a supply shock, the prices rise, the media starts exploding with attention around Bitcoin, and then suddenly everybody wants Bitcoin. And then, you know, the same play. Euphoria, blow off top, over leverage, and ultimately, on the other side of that, a crash, right? Now, historically, the cycle has been year one, which is post the crash. There's usually despair. Some people who've been a little bit experienced start accumulating, especially those people who we consider smart money, people who've been around for a little bit, who've seen it all before. They start accumulating quietly, not all at once, right? Because they don't want things to heat up too fast, right? Then we start seeing by year two, a little bit more confidence starts returning. Bitcoin begins to rally slowly, steadily. And then by year three, what we see is the parabolic run up, right? We see FOMO hit all-time high. We start seeing some institutional entry. We start seeing massive gains, or we used to seeing massive gains, 5x, 10x, 20x, 100x. And then we get to the blow off top and we enter the brutal bear market again by year 4, right? In 2012, we would have that cycle, 2012 to 2016, we would have gone from $12 in 2012. Bitcoin ran all the way up to $1,200, and then we fell 85% all the way back down, right? In 2016, the cycle started at 650. We ran all the way up to 20,000, and then we fell all the way back down to 3,000. That's the 2016 to 2020 cycle. And the 2020 to 2024 cycle saw us move from about 9,000 all the way up to 69,000. And then, the brutal FTX, Terra Caribbean, that whole year of crashes brought us all the way back down to 16,000. And we have been rallying since then, right? Quietly, and then all at once. And, the question now is the cycle repeating itself to the letter? Or if not, what has changed? What makes this particular cycle different? And for the most part, what people will tell you is that institutional involvement, right? That's the big one, right? We've seen spot Bitcoin ETFs. We've seen companies, publicly traded companies like MicroStrategy, accumulating Bitcoin. We're seeing major Wall Street participants having participation in the market, which has contributed to a bit of a change in the structure. We're seeing that the market is a lot more liquid. And we also seeing that it's less speculative, even though we've seen some crazy fallout from insane speculation, like the 19 billion crash or liquidation event based on speculation. We are generally seeing less speculation in the market, right? Additionally, we are seeing macroeconomic context shifting. So Bitcoin now trades as part of a broader risk asset class, right? So aligned with the tech stocks, we're seeing interest rates being cut. Again, we're seeing inflation continuing to do its thing. And we're seeing the US dollar strength rising, falling. And what we overall seeing is that it is a lot less driven by the whales, the traditional whales, I should say, those people who've been holding for years and have accumulated significant amounts. We're seeing that more of there's a greater level of maturity in the market, and those major holders now operate differently to some of those individuals who would have accumulated that whale status, right? So in addition to everything happening in Bitcoin, we're seeing that the crypto market as a whole is a little bit more mature. So we're seeing DeFi playing a major part. We're seeing stable coins playing a major part. We're seeing tokenized assets. We're seeing layer 2 scaling solutions. So Bitcoin is no longer the only story in town. And I think that is impacting or can impact how the cycle is viewed now, because now the cycle is not just, or the market, the industry is not just tied to what happens with Bitcoin. I think in addition to that, I think the sentiment cycle is shortening because we have so much news and so much information and so much regular influence on the market. I think we're seeing the cycle as it relates to sentiment significantly shortening. I think retail access has been improved significantly. I think a lot of the traders are a little bit more sophisticated. And I think what we might see is more compressed cycles, or we might see less extreme volatility. We've seen that already, because that liquidation event, 19 billion, barely correct us. I mean, more liquidations happened during that than Terra Luna, than FTX, and we saw the market barely move. I mean, compared to what we've seen during those previous Black Swan events. And then I think with more and more awareness around the halving and more anticipation of the halving and the halving events, I think we have to start to wonder whether or not those halving events are already priced in, especially by these institutional investors, right? Have they already contemplated that in their long-term plan? Because they are not going to be looking to accumulate BTC, sell off at the top, watch it crash, buy back, because they have their investors who will be paranoid by those kind of movements. So I think we have to contemplate whether or not these future Bitcoin halvings are actually already priced into the market. So what are the possible outcomes relative to all we've been talking about, right? A few things could happen. History continues to rhyme. So Bitcoin rallies hard to the end of 2025. We see a major rally in the next few weeks, blow off top somewhere before Christmas, and then we sink back into a bear cycle in 2026? Or do we see a continued gradual rise as institutional investors play a more significant role in the space, and we just see this smooth volatility rather than, the major movements that we've become used to? Are these 20-30% corrections the biggest movements we're going to see? Or are we going to see a complete cycle breakdown? Are we going to see ETF markets just basically gobble up all the liquidity that is created by their cycles? Honestly, none of us know, right? Whether it's your favorite YouTuber, 𝐿𝐉𝐈𝐍, whether it's your favorite Twitter, or anybody else, none of us really know what can be expected. But I think we're at this stage where I don't think, I say it all the time, adoption is inevitable, but I don't think we're at the space yet where adoption is at the stage where we can completely expect an elimination of the 4-year cycle. Maybe we have another 4-year cycle to go before we get to that place. I think we would have to see something like a major nation adopt Bitcoin as a reserve asset. Maybe a major nation accept Bitcoin as like legal tender or something like that before I could see the industry maturing significantly enough where these things aren't impactful of the price action. I think we have a little bit more. With each cycle, we're gonna have more and more experienced campaigners, right? So more and more people who this is not their first cycle, so they're not gonna capitulate as previously. And I think we're gonna see is a reduction maybe from these kind of 85% pullbacks to maybe more like 40%, 45% pullbacks, corrections. I don't see it like capitulating to under 50% again. But I've been wrong before, likely to be wrong again. But for me, straight up, it is what it is. Continue to DCA. So you get a little bit at the top, you get a little bit at the middle, you get a little bit at the bottom. And overall, long term, nobody has lost money on Bitcoin investing for 4 years or more, right? That's my strategy. Stephen has a little bit more aggressive strategy, but that's how I see things. So for right now, we're in a period of correction. Is this it for the next year or so, next 2 years or so? Are we gonna see new all-time highs before the end of the year? I think so. I think it's gonna happen real quick, and then it's gonna be done, honestly. But I guess we'll wait to see what the Fed does. Next time, we will wait to see whether or not President Trump issues his $2,000 cash incentives. A lot of different things at play before we could really figure out whether we turn this thing off or not, and whether we go back into our cocoons and wait for the next bull cycle. So that's my piece, and that's my time, right? So guys, as always, thank you for joining me. Like I said today, like I've said before, adoption is inevitable. 𝐿𝐉𝐈𝐍, OUT. Guys, be blessed.